Hi everyone, welcome to Brothers, Sisters, Strangers video podcast. I'm Ali John Chaudhary, psychotherapist, and today's topic is going to be a very important topic. And topic of rumination is something that comes up a lot. And of course, Fern and I have been talking prior to this video podcast. We've been wanting to do so much with this, and we're probably going to be doing more than one video podcast on this subject. And probably going to be pouring into other podcasts that we'll be doing. But for the time being, for today, we're going to be going into this subject that seems to be of interest for so many of our viewers. So that's what we're going to be talking about for today.
I'm Fern Chapman, the author of the upcoming book, Brothers, Sisters, Strangers. I have had the unfortunate experience of ruminating, and I'm here to tell you it's one of the most difficult challenges of sibling estrangement. And I got a big kick out of one of our audience members saying that she was ruminating about when we will be discussing the topic of rumination. And
that made me laugh.
It is a really tough nut to crack. I have to tell you, Ali John, I had sibling estrangement for decades. And I struggled all the time with this problem of not being able to stop the thoughts. You feel like your brain has gone off in its own direction and you have no control over it.
Yeah, I would agree. And the thing with rumination is that you're rehashing the same thoughts over and over again. And by doing so, it breeds sadness and negativity. And I think that that's something that certainly happens to a great number of us going through sibling estrangement or a number of difficult situations.
So let me ask you something, though, as a psychologist. Why do we ruminate? What is the purpose of that?
Yeah, when people come to me for psychotherapy, of course, I think that rumination seems to be an issue that comes up more and more. And people assume that if they think through an issue, that somehow they'll better understand and resolve it. So the brain kind of tricks us into thinking that oh, well, if I figure out this problem, then I'll be on the other side and everything will be fine again. And it doesn't work that way. It's not, when it comes to relationships and personal issues, it's not a question of figuring it out. So the mind gets trapped in that problem-solving cycle where it goes over and over again on itself and turns in circles.
So is there any real advantage to ruminating, or is this simply a worrisome chore that we do because we don't know what else to do?
No, I think some of us are traumatized, and I think that some people, that's what they experience for themselves because of past trauma and such. So it's the mind that is trying to resolve an issue in its own way by using the only tool that it knows how to do, which is to problem solve and go over and over and over again over the same thing. And what happens with a lot of people that ruminate is that people can get the sense that they have less control over their lives. And that's the type of things that kind of come up is when there's too many stressors, I think, in people's lives. It's like they get the carpet pulled from under their feet. And that's kind of what I call that in therapy is that phenomenon, when there's just so many things getting shaken up all at once, that all of a sudden the person gets a sense of a loss of equilibrium. And I think that promotes rumination.
So let's talk about that for a second. How would a person identify that they're so stressed that the rug has been pulled out from underneath them?
Well, it's the idea that you're going to be staying with certain feelings or certain images that may be replaying themselves in that way. So people can have different problems arising from the past that they're going to be reliving as opposed to just re-examining or revisiting. There's a difference between kind of flying over it versus delving and diving deep into it. And I think that's kind of what happens with a number of people. So some people have personalities, of course, that can be more privy to rumination. People that are more neurotic or perfectionists will have a tendency to ruminate more also. And people that have a tendency towards depression will also tend to ruminate more. And the danger, of course, is to get stuck in that. It's kind of like having the tires kind of spin in the mud there, you just get stuck and you get stuck in the same place.
I can speak from my own experience, and my question to you was really about stress, because sometimes people don't even recognize how stressed they are. And it took me a long time to
Mhm.
understand when I have that shortness of breath or that feeling in my gut, that these are uh, feelings in the body of stress. And I
Yep.
think you have to begin there in order to begin to address the next level, which is rumination. So you have to recognize, number one, that you're stressed. And then number two, that your brain is going in these circles, which are really unproductive.
I would agree. I think it's a matter of objectifying that and stepping out of it somewhat to be able to catch yourself and kind of see what's going on. I sometimes call that in therapy going documentary mode, where you kind of look at yourself and you kind of see, okay, well, what's going on with me here in that way, without adding fuel to the fire, without feeding it so much as observing it and recognizing what's going on. Because whenever we're doing rumination, we're adding onto it over and over again. We add onto it, and we're constantly feeding it. So it's like that wild animal that just keeps on being fed over and over again. Whereas observation means you're stepping back, you're looking at it, you're studying it without having to get emotionally involved in it. And that's a skill unto itself to learn.
Well, I actually have my own term for that. And my term is developing the third eye. So the third eye is the thing out here that is exactly what you're talking about, where you're
Yep,
looking on and actually identifying triggers and
yep,
reasons you're reacting to certain situations in certain ways. And
yep.
all of this is tied to rumination. And actually, of course, one of the suggestions you and I agree upon is that when you do ruminate, it's probably helpful to be able to talk to a therapist for precisely this, because they help you to identify what you're seeing, what are the triggers, and to really develop your third eye.
I agree. I think it's important to be able to do that within the context of therapy. I think therapy will especially be able to help people for a number of reasons to be that third eye for the time being while the person develops that ability to do that. So that's especially important to have somebody that's on the outside of it to be able, of course, to help you to go further when that's needed. Now, some people can do it, of course, outside of therapy. There's different tools, but there's some people that do, of course, recognize the need for therapy in that case, and that's why it's important to especially do that and to allow yourself to explore. And whenever you give yourself the gift of therapy, then that's because you care enough about yourself to want to do things differently.
Well, sometimes I think too that you're so mired in it that you don't even recognize, like I said, what it's doing to your brain, what it's doing to your body. And it really is a challenge to stop the thinking and the toll it's taking on your body.
I agree. I think that that's something that's really important in that way. And that's actually one of the questions from our viewers, I think, is the notion of how to stop the tape and how to compartmentalize and shut the door. I thank that viewer, of course, for putting that question up. But there's all sorts of ways to do that, of course. And I think that we can, of course, explore that and try to answer that question. But there's not a simple way to answer that. I think that there can be ways in which we can, of course, slow down our bodies, as you said earlier, Fern. I think the notion of working with our bodies and our minds is key here. That's the doorway to be able to help us to invariably slow that cycle down. Because again, the idea of saying don't think that way or don't do that, you're going to want to do it anyways. So I think that if you can go with that momentum, that's the key in finding ways in which to use both your mind and your body is the door there.
Which is, I believe, one reason why, for example, exercise is extremely helpful, because you're engaging your mind and your body, and it
Mhm.
stops the pattern that you've established without the exercise.
I agree, and one of the biggest things I usually suggest to people is of course to work with their hands in that way. If you're using your hands in whatever context, you're getting out of your mind. So that's already one of the strategies that some people can use that would be helpful for them. Definitely. So yeah, playing with
So,
cooking, doing different things. It could be some sort of woodworking or what, a craft or hobbies and such. will definitely require that concentration, that focus to be able to get out of your mind and into what's going on in the present moment.
I think it's also just because it's a project and you direct your thinking towards the completion of a project, which is very satisfying. And it stops some of that negative thinking because you have to direct all of your energy towards what you're doing or what's in front of you.
I agree. I agree. That's kind of what is especially important in that way. So again, it's interesting how you can simply transition into that mode. There's forms of transitions that can help with regards to rumination that I think that we'll be able to get into, I think, when the time is right. And I do think that self-care also is certainly part of the healing process. That was one of the questions from another viewer with regards to saying whether self-care is part of the healing process and should I continue it? Big yes. Big yes. We want for people to continue to self-care for themselves, definitely, because when you're doing that, you're invariably slowing down. So self-care implies slowing down. So whenever you're doing that, whenever you're taking the time, you're going in the right direction.
I think there's a feeling with rumination that your brain has been hijacked and you have no control over it anymore. And the brain is, like you said, just focusing over and over again on these negative thoughts. And of course, there's this whole idea of stopping those negative thoughts. In other words, the minute you feel it, you terminate it and think about something else. It's very hard to do. But I know that if you can do it, that can be very successful as well.
Yes, and that's the challenge too. And to be able to do what you're just describing there, I think requires that stepping back and that observation to not feed that fire, so to speak. So if you can do that and be conscious enough to not get involved as much in the thoughts, then yes, you're opening up the door to being able to slow down the thoughts invariably. So I don't want to say it's impossible. That's not true. It is possible. We can certainly do that, and some of us have done it. And the trick, of course, is to get there and to objectify first, and then once objectification is able, the third eye, as you said, is being able to be done, then everything else should be easier, and especially when it comes to that.
I think one of the things I learned through rumination is I control what I think. And ruminating, even though I don't like it, I'm driving it. So I can stop it too. And it also is completely unproductive in terms of the actual fact that you are estranged from your sibling. It does nothing to change the circumstances. You can ruminate, like you said, all you want. And at the end of the day, you're still not talking to your brother or sister.
Exactly.
So I think it's important to kind of gain control over your own thinking and recognize that your mind is your space.
And a good way to do that, of course, is to use that momentum and that vividness that the mind has to steer it in the right place. I think that driving is a great analogy because, oftentimes if we steer ourselves in a good direction, then we're invariably going in towards where we want to be, and we stay right within the confines of our driving lane when we're steering and we have our hands on the wheel. So as opposed to doing anything else. So I do think that the Lighthouse Technique is a great testament to that, that we've talked about, in one of my videos I did on solutions and strategies. I think that the Lighthouse Technique is certainly one of the prime examples that we can use that certainly helps us to, of course, use our minds in such a way that we can bring it into a place where you're using your thoughts as an ally as opposed to spinning in circles and avoiding excessive rumination and such.
Well, we're almost out of time, but I have to say this. For decades, I was estranged from my brother, and unfortunately, for decades, I ruminated about it. I'm not very proud of it, but the reality is that I believe this is one of the toughest things to conquer. But there are strategies, as we've identified, and I know we can talk next time about more of them. But I think it's important to recognize that this is a real challenge for those of us who are estranged.
I absolutely agree with you. It's one of the most painful experiences we have when we're going through estrangement. And definitely we'll need to explore some of these strategies more so. There are more things we can add with regards to this that people can do. But I think we've covered a lot today within the time that we've had, Fern. So to be honest, I think I'm quite satisfied with what we've had in terms of a discussion here that I think will be applicable to a great number of us. So.
Well, I think too, we should encourage all of our viewers to post questions and comments. We are happy to take on some of your challenges in our discussions, and some of this actually came from viewers as well. So it's wonderful to have that connection and that the questions as well.
I agree, and I encourage our viewers, if you're listening, please do send in your questions, and if you're part of the Facebook group, Sibling Estrangement, Sharing, Coping, Connecting, then definitely that's the place to ask those questions. And definitely Fern and I will be able to help you with that, and perhaps have that, of course, answered in some of our future video podcasts together.
Well, it's been great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Well,
Always nice to talk.
Thanks again for doing this, Fern, and we'll talk again soon. Hopefully on more topics that we hold dear to our hearts. Thanks, Fern.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.